What's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the California Underground Podcast. I'm your host, Phil. I'm here with, as always, my trusty co-host, the best and fastest researcher in the West, Camila. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing all right. We were just discussing before we hopped on about how videos with noodles in them. Not noodles, the actual noodles, noodles the governor, which is why I'm wearing my noodle shirt. Um, it sucks because we have to watch it and then we have to watch it again. So we suffer twice for our listeners and our fans because we have to watch it. We have to get all our fact checks ready. We have to get all our sources ready. And then we have to sit here and watch it again with you guys. So, in that vein, we suffer for you guys. That's what I'm going to talk about tonight. Um, really, the theme of tonight's show is we've talked about it before. This idea that President Newsom is sort of in the wings, that President or running this like shadow campaign, not running for president, just been out there visiting other states. He's got this pack. He's attacking Ron DeSantis, who was supposed to be the front runner. I feel like Ron DeSantis is just falling off the face of the earth at this point when it comes to. I haven't heard anything about him running for really doing anything presidential. And there's been more hubbub about the whole scandal with Hunter and all that stuff. We're not really going to talk about that much, but we're going to kind of introduce the theory or the idea of it tonight. Anything before we hop into all of that tonight before we get started?
Well, back to Ron. It's funny you say that because he was here in California last week. And you're right. We barely heard about it. Nothing. And then, yeah, Newsom is basically running a campaign without officially announcing.
Yeah. I feel like maybe I'm not really following presidential politics as much. We kind of really focused a lot on California politics here.
I know, and you're forcing me to do this here tonight.
I mean, I guess there is a race coming up next year, but it's still really early to really kind of be talking about presidential politics. Some people are really already talking about. Actually, the one person I feel like I hear a lot about is RFK Jr. I feel like a lot of people are talking about him. We're not going to do an episode necessarily on RFK Jr. I have
but
a lot of people.
Wants to come on,
if he's listening, RFK Jr. will definitely not turn down a guest appearance if you want to come on. You're more than welcome to come on to the podcast. I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear your thoughts. So, but yeah, so I'm going to start off with this article from the American Spectator. And the title of it was "Last Week, the Beginning of Biden. The most ominous sign involves the behavior of a corporate media." It goes on to say, something changed last week inside the Beltway. People who run the Democratic Party now realize President Biden's tenure in office is not 2024. The tell was not, however, the latest revelation by IRS whistleblowers about his corrupt administration. It was instead the sudden awakening of the White House press corps, the same reporters who snored through more than 2 years of preposterous claims by Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre and her predecessors simultaneously woke up Friday. Correspondents from media outlets CNN, CNBC, NBC, and the other New York Times aggressively questioned Jean-Pierre about the metastasizing Hunter Biden scandals. As George Washington University Turley succinctly puts it in The Hill, quote, "The only thing abundantly clear is that someone is lying. Either these whistleblowers are lying to Congress or these Justice Department officials, including Garland, are lying. It is also clear the incentives all point in one direction. Merrick Garland and the other political appointees at the Department of Justice could and probably have multiple reasons to lie. The two whistleblowers have absolutely nothing to gain by doing so. They have voluntarily put themselves at considerable risk by coming forward. Gary, all too clear in his opening statement at the House Ways Committee." Let's see. That's basically what I want to bring up. So we're not going to get too far into. Not really the point of tonight's episode. The reason I bring this up is there has always been a lot of chatter that if Newsom were to get into the race, it would require Biden stepping aside. And a lot of people have speculated deals with Hunter, something in his past is going to come back, and that will force Joe Biden to kind of step aside gracefully, protect his family or something like that. And maybe the regime will be like, "Hey, Biden, it's time for you to kind of move aside and let somebody else come up." And that's why we're going to be talking about the idea of President Newsom. Um, the fact that the White House pushing a little bit more does show that Biden and the administration is in a little bit more trouble right now. The fact that the corporate media, who has been so cozy with Biden, is starting to wake up a little bit and push him on a lot of this stuff, and the Biden administration doesn't want to talk about it, shows that there's a scandal brewing, and it would be about the perfect time to kind of step aside and probably announce that he's not running in 2024. So, do you have any thoughts about the current Biden situation in the White House?
Yeah, I mean, politics aside, he's really not very competent anymore. I mean, it seems like old age is really setting in. We're seeing him fall more and more often, and he can't pronounce words. He doesn't know what year it is when he's talking. But I don't remember if it was that article that you sent me or something else that I read where their fear is, though, is that they don't want him to be a lame duck too soon. And so they have to carefully navigate this over the next, I guess, what is 18 months now.
Right. They don't want it to be like, yeah, if he announces now that he won't be running again, that's almost, I don't know, well over a year and a half before be out of office.
Right.
So,
And Kamala Harris does not have good ratings either, from what I hear. I hear her ratings keep dropping and dropping, and nobody really likes her or wants her around. And so people wouldn't necessarily be excited. Democrats wouldn't necessarily be excited for Biden to step aside and Kamala to take over.
one thing I was
say, it's a mess. I wanted to use stronger language, but it's a mess.
One thing that I was thinking about right before we hopped on about an hour or so ago, I wonder if, and this may be just hypothesizing here, I wonder if, let us know what your thoughts are. Let us know all your comments and questions. I think, tinfoil hat time, I think that they have not gone through with this plan as fast because of RFK Jr.
And expand on that.
I think because he's polling around 20%. He's the most popular Democrat not named Biden right now out there. He's the most popular candidates not named Trump as well. So basically, he's the third guy. And I think if you open the field and say, okay, guess what? Biden's not running again. We're going to have an open primary. We're going to set up all the caucuses and everything like that, Iowa, whatever. I think they're scared that it gives more room to run, because during sort of his trajectory and his momentum is, a lot of people are like, well, he's not going to do anything because he beat the incumbent president. They're not going to have a primary.
Mm-hmm.
The DNC has already come out and said, we're not going to have a primary. We're not going to let him primary our incumbent. That's not how these things are done. And I think they might actually, right now, RFK is getting more and more popular. He was just on Joe Rogan. Millions and millions of people have tuned into him. A lot more people are obviously listening to what he has to say. Like, I think he's got more buzz around him than Trump or DeSantis right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that, honestly, they're like scared if we open the primary, he's the clear front runner right out the gate. And that's not.
So you think they want Newsom?
I would think they want Newsom. I think Newsom seems to be the logical pick. I think they've groomed him. He's always been a party yes man, a party loyalist. He'll do whatever it takes to get to the next rung of power. And he's not an ethical man in that sense. We know he's been looking for the next brass ring. And if the party says, do this, be a good little foot soldier for now, then maybe we'll swing you into the presidential election. I think he'd do anything. I think they don't want RFK because he's the outsider. He's the Trump. What did I say? That he's the MAGA candidate for the Democrats right now.
Even Republicans, I guess. Wow, I just can't speak. Even Republicans like him. Like, I'm seeing a lot of my Republican friends saying we got to check this guy out.
Yeah, I was looking at on Instagram on the comments. A lot of people, he was asking for a fundraising push because it's coming up, like the cycle or something. And a lot of people in the comments were saying, "I'm a Republican. I never thought I'd donate to a Democrat." Or a lot of people said, "I've never donated to a presidential candidate. This is the first time ever doing it." Um, and here we are. He's got the most buzz, I think, around him right now. So that's why I think the Democrats, if they're trying to control this as much as possible, so they can do the old switcheroo really quickly and get then slide Newsom in, they may have to wait for a period where RFK is not popular or he's sliding in the polls. If they did it right now, they would be open to the fact that RFK Jr. could probably run away with it and it'd be all over. And then that would be your Democrat candidate. And who knows, general him versus Trump or DeSantis. So
I know we're not here to talk about RFK, but real quick, I haven't been paying attention much to the presidential race either because I just don't care yet. I'll care eventually. What is it? I know RFK is very pro choice when it comes to vaccines. He's against the mandates. I think he might even be anti-vax. I forget. I know there was just that whole fight, but I don't remember what his stance, if he was like anti or if he was just anti-mandate. What do you think it is about him that's appealing to both sides?
the long-term interview I listened to with him was with Dave Smith. I think he's got a win in Ukraine, which shows that I think a lot of Americans are fed up with what's going on in Ukraine. I think that's really kind of waned in terms of support by Americans, no matter how much the corporate media pushes that all of a sudden we're all on board with Ukraine. I think his message on Ukraine is strong. He was, I don't think he's, they call him anti vax. I think he's anti medical tyranny, is what he kind of says he is. He's like, he was asked, "What would you have done if you were president during COVID?" He said something to the effect of like, "I would have based my information, I would have based my decisions based on science and a panel and medical experts from all like different backgrounds, and I wouldn't have just trusted one or two people."
But that makes him anti-vax immediately. Oh, you're a
It makes him
crazy
anti-vax because he was not
conspiracy theorist.
pushing the vaccine. And I think he has sort of that old school Democrat, very traditional, kind of like the Kennedys were, that a model of like, let's create jobs here. Let's make sure we protect our borders. And it's weird. He sounds almost like just a moderate Republican. So maybe that's why a lot of Republicans are kind of getting behind. But yeah, I think he just kind of touches on a lot of topics. I'm not saying I'm a RFK like, super fan who be like, let's go RFK. As many of you know, I don't tell you who I vote for in a lot of
Mhm.
things. That's not the point of the show. But yeah, I think he just touches on a lot of issues. I think he just touches on a lot of issues that show a lot of Americans are behind these issues, and the corporate media and the regime and the establishment don't want you to or be behind these ideas. And I think he touches upon them. And I think, outside of, if you can get past, he does have a speech impediment, something about his voice. He can't speak as clearly. But when you do listen to him, he speaks in a manner that you can actually understand, like, oh, he's me. I get it, as opposed to Trump can go off on stuff and you can sit here and go, I idea what the heck you're talking about. So, yeah,
All right.
I think that's why he's probably gaining a lot of traction. And he's an outsider. Um, Again, we're not here to talk all night about politics or presidential. Well, we're here to talk about politics, presidential politics.
What
No,
we're
actually,
talking
we're not
about.
here to talk about politics. We're here to talk about other things. Changing the show format. I think, and this is something I was thinking about the other day. I wonder how many people are in love with of Trump or love Trump. And let me explain. I think there's a lot of people who love the idea of Trump and now are not in love with Trump. So when Trump was the outsider, he was beholden to nobody. He said all these things that were against the establishment, that were against the grain. He said stuff that nobody was talking about. It's what Michael Moore said about him. He's the Molotov cocktail that people want to throw into DC to kind of just destroy DC because they're fed up with what's going on there. And their mentality is taking root in America. Underlying frustration from both sides of the aisle that things are just not getting done and politicians don't care anymore. So that's why I think like RFK is getting popular. That's why I think there's a Trump. I think this outsider mentality is taking root. And that's why I think like a Gavin Newsom doesn't work, because he's such a party loyalist. I don't think people would look at him and be like, oh, he's the outsider. It's like, no, he's pushing the agenda that the corporate media and the regime have been pushing for years. So anyway, ready to this video?
Yeah. You know what I feel like this video was missing was Jennifer Newsom translating in Spanish.
I feel like she should have been sitting there translating in Spanish.
I feel the same way.
So that it was more inclusive, so people could actually watch
it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Spanish.
Exactly.
Yep. I feel the same way. That was the first thing I knew. But in all seriousness,
was it really? Did you actually think about that?
No, I didn't think about that. The first thing I would say about this, I've said this before. Newsom is a slick politician. He's got the chops. He knows what to say. He knows how to present it. He's very good at what he does. It pains me to say that, which is why he's dangerous, is because he's very good at this. I think he bested Sean Hannity. I think Sean Hannity looked like he was kind of flipping and flopping all over the place.
Hannity was kissing his ass.
And Hannity was kissing his ass for most of it. He was talking about how much he loves his passion.
Yeah, like, and this isn't personal. And yeah, what you said.
I agree with this, and we agree on these issues. And very buddy, which I guess there's nothing wrong with that. You can be.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's not really a reason to be unkind, but it did annoy me that he was. Yeah, no, I know you, and I know you. And just like.
You're very passionate. That was his big thing. You're very passionate. So yeah, we'll start the video. Let me pull this up. It's altogether it's about 40, but I'll probably skip around just because I don't think
there's lots of breaks. I know, so it's not a full hour.
Yeah, and they really care about watching. So let's hop into it.
Everything, but to the governor's credit, he did entire hour. He answered most of our questions. And by the way, that was something that the president of the United States, Joe Biden, is not even remotely capable of doing. So without further ado, here is part one of my interview with California's Democratic Governor, Gavin Newsom. All right, so I write you. It got a lot of pickup, I'm sure you saw as well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I want to do an interview.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do an interview. I want to make sure the audience understands up front. This is not going to be me. I want you to answer and give your views. I would say you represent probably about half the country, your views, and the other half represents mine. You agree? We're kind of divided.
Plus or minus, certainly divided. Yeah. No question. I mean, we're polarized, we're traumatized. We clearly are in these, and we're in these echo chambers. I mean, let's be candid, Sean. I mean, your folks are watching you and getting a certain perspective, and my folks are watching other networks getting a certain perspective
we
as
have
well.
Studies that show a lot of Democrats watch me.
Well, including me. So I'm here for a reason. To wit the point, though, I think we need more of that cross-pollination. We need more of these kind of conversations, and we need to not just accuse each other of misleading the American people, but I think confront each other in the context of.
Okay, I'm going to start off, and I apologize to all the listeners. I'm not turning into a Democrat just because I said good things about RFK, and I'm about to agree with Gavin Newsom on something. So, big disclaimer. I do agree we do need more sit-downs and across party lines, actual conversations, not 2-minute Fox News clips of like, let's all get into panel for 2 minutes and then go to commercial break. I don't think it's a bad idea. More people need to sit down and have full-length conversations where they actually present their arguments. Maybe they agree, maybe they disagree. I don't think kudos to him for actually showing up to Hannity and doing this, but I do agree with him on that point. And that, well, excuse me, that I said I agree with Newsom on something. So any thoughts about people sitting down talking to each other? Is that a good thing?
No, absolutely. It's a good thing because we should have all learned to be civil and understand that we don't all agree on everything. And that's not a good reason to start yelling at somebody. And it's not going to accomplish anything if everyone's just yelling at everybody. No one ever is going to be able to move forward and get anything done.
Absolutely.
Of providing opportunities to address some of the facts that are often omitted in terms of the conversations and topics we choose to pick up.
So what I see is, I don't know how you reconcile some of these differences. Now, you either believe in secure borders and law and order, and people that would want to come into our country have to do it legally. I'm the product of that.
Right.
Or there are people that want open borders. You believe in defund, dismantle, no bail laws like cities like in New York, where the show originates from, or you believe law and order, safety, security is a...
I also want to point out, they are sitting in the governor's mansion in Sacramento. Gavin Newsom and his family do not live in the governor's mansion and provided for the governor. He thought it was beneath him when he was elected. So he and his family bought a $4 million house in one of the most expensive suburbs of Sacramento, 45 minutes away. So they don't actually live at the governor's mansion. If to give you an idea of how elitist.
So he's going to let homeless people live there, right?
He should. No one's living there, so I don't know what he does. Does he have an office there? I don't know. I thought the governor's office was like in the Capitol building or something, but yeah, no one lives there. So while they are sitting there, they should have had it at his $4 million house. That probably would have been really nice. Talk about all the carbon emissions for 45 minutes back and forth that he has to truck his family in. And, if Jennifer, the first partner, doesn't go with him, it's another car. And how many cars back and forth between his mansion and Sacramento? Just a thought.
A prerequisite for the pursuit of happiness. You want energy, and you don't want any domestic energy production. I mean, how do you reconcile?
Well, I don't see those binaries at all. Quite the
You don't see it at all?
No, I don't. I mean, I want border security. Democrats want border security. We also want
But you don't want any walls.
I want comprehensive immigration reform. I want to actually address the issue more comprehensively, just like Ronald Reagan did in 1989. Just like, and with respect, Sean, you promoted yourself with the Gang of Eight and bipartisan legislation that got 68 votes in the Senate, only to die in the House, that could fundamentally address this issue, which is the issue. So I don't see those.
But I always
binaries.
had as my position, build the wall first.
Amnesty. That's what he's talking about. He wants Ronald Reagan style amnesty. And I think the Gang of Eight also had a clause for amnesty as well. So that's what Gavin Newsom believes in, is he wants amnesty.
You're against building any wall.
I know. I have no problem with the 650 plus miles we have on border walls. I come from a state with the largest, San Ysidro is the largest land port in the Western Hemisphere. I don't need to be educated on the issue of the border or issues of...
You've heard it here first. Gavin Newsom, pro-wall. Just so we're all on the same page. San Ysidro, which is 20 minutes just south of where I am. We cross it pretty frequently. It's pretty incredible. A lot of cars go back and forth across San Ysidro. So, and there are big walls down there. But you heard it here first. Gavin Newsom is pro-wall on his border.
Issues of immigration policy.
One thing, Medi-Cal for illegals is $1 billion to the state.
And how many billions are we spending for uncompensated care? People end up in the emergency.
Can I ask you,
on the back end, wasting taxpayer money?
Why is it wrong to just demand, if you want to come to this country, obey our laws, respect our borders, respect our sovereignty, apply, come in, and we
Love
can
it.
expedite the application
It's
process.
the latter part. Now you're having a conversation. This is where I think the vast majority of America
That's
is.
why I'm here.
Well, that's the point.
I'm here to
And that
bring us
was-
together.
And that was the point of the comprehensive reform. Where's
Yeah.
Congress? I mean, look, you can criticize Biden all the time. Biden's border crisis. I watch 24/7 surround sound anger machine around that. I get it.
Wait a minute. In 3 years,
I get it.
he will allow over 7.5 million people illegally into this country.
Right.
You have to see there's something wrong with that.
No, I do. And I see there's something right with what he's done post Title 42, a 70% reduction, taking a lot of the core tenets that the previous administration used. He's now being
Right.
sued by the left, not just being applauded, certainly by the right. That said, here's what's missing. The conversation you just suggested we should be having around dealing with asylum seekers and backlogs and updating and modernizing our visas and addressing a pathway that Ronald Reagan himself acknowledged.
Let me ask you if
and
you
I think
support
those
this.
things are missing.
Should we have background checks?
Yes.
Should, in the middle of a pandemic, health checks?
We did.
Should we have means testing so the people that enter this country are not going to be a financial burden on the American people?
We prioritize already with we prioritize with STEM, we prioritize with visas already.
Okay, so we have Gavin Newsom supports the wall on his border. He also supports the core tenets of the Trump immigration policies from before. So he supports that, and he supports background checks. And what else did he sounds pretty Republican on a lot of these issues for someone who's from California, right?
Yes, but I also feel like he just keeps trying to throw it in Hannity's face. Like he just keeps bringing up Ronald Reagan to be like level with him, like, your governor, Republican governor, Ronald Reagan, because this is not the only time he brings up Reagan. And so I feel like he's trying to be like, you're accusing me of all this stuff, but this isn't what I believe. But yet that's not, he's saying he believes these things, but that's not what he's putting into practice and policy as the governor.
Right. And this is one reason why I don't like the whole Reagan worship of the Republican Party, where they just have, cutouts of Reagan everywhere. And everyone says, oh, I have to go back to when everything was like Reagan. Because the left then uses it as a weapon, basically saying like, well, Ronald Reagan believed in this stuff and you have Ronald Reagan up there with Jesus Christ. So why don't you agree with Reagan? You love Reagan.
Right.
And if you go through his presidency, there's probably a lot people would disagree with when it comes to Reagan. And yeah, he mentions it a lot throughout this. That's his whole tactic is like, well, Sean, Ronald Reagan said this and you love Ronald Reagan. But you don't have to love everything a president does. But it's interesting that he sounds so tough on immigration. I think that's also, Democrats are also feeling the heat on immigration a little bit more. I think they're starting to see a lot more Hispanics kind of move over to the Republican side, and immigration is probably something that's driving it, from Florida to Texas to a lot of places. So I think they're probably starting to see the pressure from that. The numbers and the focus groups are saying we need to get a little tougher on immigration. We can't open border. So
right. And so he's going to have to start to move towards the middle of that if he wants to run for president. So this is like a pre-campaign. We'll see what I said here. I told you all on Fox News. So
it'd be interesting in a hypothetical presidential candidacy of Gavin Newsom. He just said he supports the 650 miles of wall that is on California's border because he governs a border state. Does that now mean, does he translate that into a general election and say it worked in California, the wall, so let's build it the rest of the country and finish the wall?
I won't be surprised.
Is Gavin Newsom going to advocate to build president? That would be
fascinating. And then I would love to see how they would flip this of like, well, no, when I said this is what I meant. And when Trump said it, that's what he, like.
I said it because I want to protect the country and do it correctly. But when Trump said it, it's because he hates Mexicans.
Yes, he's racist. So
exactly.
Absolutely.
Build the wall. Gavin Newsom, 2024, build the wall. Finish the wall.
already. We
You're going to
prioritize
give
as well
a
as
free
essential
college
workforce.
education and $2.7 billion of taxpayer dollars in California to Medi-Cal.
And
That's for illegal immigrants only.
And we're spending the money already. I know everybody on the right can't stand sanctuary policy. I understand.
Okay, so I looked this up. This is going to be the first fact check of this episode. This is from Cal Matters. California is expanding Medi-Cal, but hundreds of thousands of immigrants will still be left behind. Let's see. Expansion would still leave several 100,000 undocumented immigrants, like mentioned, uninsured. They're unable to qualify for jobs where they earn above Medi-Cal's annual income thresholds for most adults. 17 single people, 23,000 for a couple, and 36,000 for a family of four. That leaves many low-income immigrants with a few viable options for health coverage, while most Californians who limit can get subsidized coverage through Cover California. Undocumented people are not allowed to buy insurance through the marketplace under the federal Affordable Care Act. In 2023, after Medi-Cal expands to cover undocumented immigrants, older, about 3.2 million people will remain uninsured in California, according to researchers at UC Berkeley. Of those, 1.16 million will be immigrants. That's a new term, unauthorized immigrants. Even if Newsom's next step is approved, covering undocumented adults 26 to 49 as early as 2024, that would still leave roughly 450,000 undocumented people under 65 with no health coverage. So, just to kind of make a comment on he likes to pat himself on the back for this, but it's not being fully implemented.
Yeah.
In terms of if you're going to take a victory lap on it, it's not quite the victory, and hundreds of thousands of unauthorized, undocumented immigrants are not going to be able to get access to spending the money on.
They're sitting in accounts. Like I read another article and they authorize a certain amount of funds at a time, but the funds are sitting there. So in 2020, I want to say they released some of the funds, and so it helped X amount of people. Now it's kind of like I guess next year they're going to release funds, or maybe it's this year. I don't know how it works. It makes no sense to me.
But it does look like it's not going to the people that he's purporting it to go to. So
right, or at least not as many, or soon enough.
Yeah. But also, the right likes to make it seem like it's going to be just every undocumented immigrant is going to get free health care just for walking across the border, but it has to meet certain poverty lines and certain income. Not a roaring success.
Understand that Rudy Giuliani, by the way, Trump's old attorney, was a huge sanctuary policy.
I didn't know that.
Actually said it keeps you healthier, safer, and more educated. Actually made those arguments when he was mayor of New York. It's the cards that are dealt in the absence of comprehensive reform. I'm all for comprehensive reform. I'm for background checks. I'm for addressing border security in all its forms and manifestations, not just walls. Addressing a legal pathway. I'm actually wanting to address all these issues, but I want to do it.
He's for border security in all forms and safety. Is that police statement?
Is that a pro law enforcement statement?
Yeah.
Interesting.
More guns.
So are we pro law enforcement and the wall?
This is getting suspicious.
It's almost like it's time to hand Gavin a red hat.
Not just bastardize the conversation as exclusively about the border.
Okay, I have here my pile of stuff, the exact federal law that prohibits. Now, there are two court decisions that you might be able to cite. One is that was in the Ninth Circuit. The other is some wording and one opinion that Justice Scalia gave some years back. But it is unambiguous when you read the 18 U.S. Code as it relates to entering the country that you've got to do so legally. By characterizing the state as sanctuary, aren't you thereby violating federal law, the books, and that our own Constitution unequivocally that, in fact, you should be following?
These sanctuary policies have been on the books for decades. Cities, Democratic cities, Republican-led cities in the past, Democratic states, clearly, more modern conception around dealing with reality, the cards that are dealt. You want people that are victims of crime to come forward and report those crimes. That's the purpose of sanctuary. You want a kid.
You want guilty of crimes to come forward and report those crimes, or victims of crime to report.
I don't know what he said because I'm kind of stuck on the fact that he doesn't actually ever answer the question. He just spins it.
Yeah, it's in the Constitution lesson. There is a preemption clause, meaning, or the supremacy clause, meaning that anything the federal government does can preempt anything states do. That's the idea of, comes from the idea of the sovereign and the king, and basically that the federal government can preempt and is supremacy over everything. So I think that's what Sean Hannity was trying to ask, which is that the Constitution has this, if there's federal law and the Constitution clearly gives the federal government control over immigration, not the states. So if states thumb their nose at laws that are created by the federal government of federal law, and there's really no that states can make because they're subordinate to the federal government. That was a little free constitutional advice, or quick little constitutional, anybody for it.
Yes.
I think, and he's not you're right. He's being a little Weasley on this because he's not really answering whether they're in violation. He's like, oh, they've been on the books forever. Blah, blah. Okay, sure. How does he feel about, when states don't listen to federal law and federal nullification? Because that's effectively what this is. That's a nullification. Thomas Jefferson talked about it. This idea of like the states can nullify actions of the federal government by just not obeying it, even if they're if they're violating federal law. I wonder how he would feel about nullification processes by other states. Maybe red states nullify and say, well, this issue or that issue. So it does open an interesting legal argument. And he doesn't really answer the question.
Educated that's here regardless of how they got here. You want that kid educated. You want to take care of someone that's in an emergency and not have them concerned to be deported by a nurse. The point is you deal with reality. But look, I'm happy to get rid of those protections by doing the hard work of actually coming together as a nation across our differences and support comprehensive reform and modernize our asylum system and immigration system. This issue will only get worse. It's not just a border issue. Is the point.
7.5 million people under Joe Biden will illegally enter this country in 3 years of his presidency. Yep. To me, that's unconscionable. That's unfair to the American people. That's unfair to the states, including your state. That's unfair to border states like Texas. But here's where I want to just pause a second and ask you a really serious question. Yeah. I don't think Joe Biden is mentally, physically capable of being the president of the United States.
That's a hell of a pivot, Sean. You've been on TV and radio this long, and you went from immigration to I'm going to pivot to the fact that the president of the United States is basically discuss.
United States. Hang on. I suspect if I took your phone, go look at it. Not that I believe in privacy. I would never do that. I would bet on a daily basis that there are people urging you to run for president and primary him. Am I wrong in my assumption?
Well, my phone's been lighting up at how well he did with the UK Prime Minister. My phone lit up and how
that's a nice duck.
McCarthy.
Light up.
My phone lights up with Republican friends saying, you know what? Despite all of the rhetoric, these bipartisan bills he keeps passing on infrastructure and the CHIPS and Science Act, the bipartisan work he did on gun legislation reform and around the debt.
Lies. He's saying his Republican friends are saying all this. No, not even your Democrat friends are saying that, buddy.
No, I don't think his phone is blowing up with people going, OMG, did you see what the president did today? Oh my God, that's so great.
We're going to have to wait till 2028 because Biden is so amazing. Like, that's not happening.
You have no chance at all.
Debt ceiling, make me feel a little bit better job than
But
some
that
are
wasn't my
suggesting.
question. Does your phone light up with Gavin, you need to get in this primary? He's not able to run. He's not up to the job.
Look, everybody has their quiet chatter, and everybody's out there rooting for America. I'm rooting for our president. I have great confidence in his leadership.
I don't want him
what
to
he accomplished.
I think his policies are failing.
CHIPS Act, Science Act, do you oppose that?
I will tell you on every measure from the economy, inflation, borders, energy, national security, he's missing.
In order. Let's
hang on.
Wait, but I want to challenge the premise. You said the economy, 13.1 million jobs he's created. More.
These are post-COVID jobs. Okay. You know that.
Well,
Okay. First, or this is second fact check. Okay, let's see. Second fact check. Did Biden actually create more jobs? That's been something that about. Did he create 12 million new jobs? And this is town hall, but they do quote PolitiFact a lot. So if you come at town hall, they quote from PolitiFact. When the nation recovered from the sudden job losses that government mandated pandemic lockdowns in 2020, the jobs recovery began under former President Donald Trump, but because his tenure ended only 8 months into the economic revival cycle, much of the jobs accrued during Biden's time in office. Quote, this is literally evidence that Biden, golden platter, Douglas Holtz-Eakin, head of American Tang, told PolitiFact, this recovery from a deep recession would have happened no matter who. Let's see, the proportion of adults who either had a job or were looking for one edged to 62.4% in January, which is below the pre-pandemic level of 63.4%. Meanwhile, most Americans, 60% of them, believe that Biden has not created more good jobs in their communities, published on a Washington Post ABC poll. So, percentage-wise, U.S. jobs under Biden's watch has increased by 8.5% since his presidential term started, which is less than that of former President Barack Obama's first term, 8.6. Biden's first term, 10.5. Ronald Reagan, 11.2. President Jimmy Carter, 12.8. Using this metric, PolitiFact measured that job gains is also outmatched by former President Nixon, 13.2, Lyndon B. Johnson, 21.3, and Clinton's 21.9. So,
well, okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. Just a moment ago, Hannity asked him about the border, and Gavin sounded very presidential, saying he, once he's willing to do the hard work with the nation and come together and do border reform. Then he turns around a moment later to defend Biden on all his policies and how great they're working, including the border.
Mm-hmm.
Did he just say he believes that the border needs to be reformed, and then he just said Biden's doing fantastic on the border?
Yeah. He said there definitely needs to be comprehensive reform. It sounds like there's a lot of work to be done on immigration, and the border, and but also is slaying it. He's just absolutely killing it on the border. So,
okay. And can you real quick touch on the government doesn't create jobs?
Right. The government doesn't create jobs because, well, the government can create jobs. It can create public sector jobs. But in terms of private ADP, like payrolls, which is what like the stock market goes off of. So every month there's like a jobs report by ADP. And they'll say like, several 100,000 jobs were created last month. The government doesn't create jobs. The government can get out of the way of creating jobs. And so this idea that actively creates jobs is such a misnomer, and it's such weaselly language to make people believe that the president somehow sits there and figures out how to create jobs. They don't. They get out of the way of job creation, or they get out of the way of businesses being. And that's basically it. If the president has a business-friendly environment that people can start businesses under and create jobs, there's a business-friendly environment that businesses will go, hey, it looks like, the Trump tax cuts are going into effect and my business can make a lot more money and I can now hire more people because I'm not going to pay as much in payroll taxes. the government's not creating that job. They're more so getting out of the way and creating an environment where more jobs are created by private entrepreneurs. So,
right. And if they're creating jobs in the public sector, aren't they then just taxing us more dollars to pay for those jobs?
correct. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely one of those where the more jobs you create here in California, the more money they make on the back end. So, which just funds the enormous Sacramento apparatus that is. So,
Okay,
yeah.
sorry, I'll stop. I know we have a lot to get through.
Line, whenever they say a president has created, it's BS. They don't create jobs. Their environment creates jobs. So,
I mean, that's an artificial number.
Like this as an opportunity to engage civilly on this.
Okay.
Fair point. Your president, Donald Trump, lost 2.6 million jobs during his 4 years. We've created 30. Fine, you can maintain a COVID frame. How about the fact that Joe Biden's created more jobs, 6 times more jobs than the previous 3 Republican presidents combined?
Are you going to tell me
Sean,
that the average family of Americans now living paycheck to paycheck?
It was 70% under Trump. That was 70%. It was 70% under Donald Trump.
Pre-COVID, we had the lowest unemployment rate for every demographic.
We have the lowest black unemployment. You and I are living with the lowest unemployment in our lifetime, Sean.
We had it for every demographic, and the economy was
black unemployment's record low under Joe Biden.
Okay. We had historic low after historic low under Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. I mean, but he's
what I don't want to have
Trump's clock, Biden, in terms of the progress and job creation. Look at what he's done on jobs.
What would you grade Joe Biden's presidency? Because you're at odds with the American people and the Democratic Party.
I'm just dealing with the facts. I'm dealing with the facts.
What is your grade?
I'm going to go back. You brought up 6 topics.
You got to answer some questions.
I'm answering the ones in order. You brought up the economy. On the economy, let's talk about the economy.
You want to give him an A?
Inflation, stubborn around the globe. Let's talk about inflation. It's down 40% since last summer, 10 months in a row, 4.9%. He was just with the UK Prime Minister at 6.9%. Is that because of Biden's?
I think
Fed
Biden's
policy?
Economic and energy policies
Directly impacted the UK's inflation?
No, I am
Or the
telling
fact that France is 5.5% or Germany's at 6.1%? On inflation, we're moving in the right direction. On the issue of the border security,
we inherited 1.4% inflation. It went up to 40-year high after 40-year high.
Globally, because you just brought up, you were making an excuse.
okay, so they're yelling at each other. I kind of want to just kind of cut through the BS of what they're yelling about. So inflation obviously happened because of COVID. There is no denying. Economists believe that COVID or inflation absolutely happened because, very simple, you shut off supply, there's still demand, less supply, more money chasing goods. Combine that to make it a real firestorm of everything going wrong. Take trillions of dollars, pump it into the economy, whether through businesses or stimulus checks or stuff like that. Now you have even more money, chasing even fewer goods. Control. So inflation is obviously rampant around the globe. How people are kind of tackling it. Jerome Powell has been trying to bring down inflation through rate hikes. I don't want to get too long. That's not the point of this podcast. But yeah, it's still high. And in terms of California, we all sit here and look at, and this is kind of relevant because Newsom was just championing the fact that his new petroleum or oil company watchdog went into effect. Gas is still $5 a gallon. Okay. Gas got up after COVID, after all of that, when inflation started and when there was more demand. It has not come down. So I have not seen a reduction in terms of at the gas pump. I haven't seen it in terms of my grocery bill, in terms of energy that I'm paying for. SDG&E keeps raising our rates over and over again. So I don't know what he's talking about that it's down 40%. It's probably still really high. It must have started from a really high spot and come down 40% because it still feels like inflation is incredibly high across anywhere. What do you think?
All of our basic necessities are outrageously expensive. My husband and I are like, where's all the money going? And you look at it, and we're like, we bought food. We paid our utility bill, you know? And yeah, I looked today when I was out, I passed a gas station 485, and Saturday it increases what, 8% tax hike?
Yeah, that's going into effect this weekend.
The first.
Yep. July 1st, there will be a spike in the gas tax in California. July. So happy birthday, America. And you.
Yeah. Anyway, just everything is so much more expensive. And I have 4 kids, and buying them food is insane. Just to have a water line, just to have access to water, not actually getting water is costing us so much a month. And then getting water is like, okay, now we just paid 4 times that, and the gas bills have gone up and everything. And then, because gas has gone up, of course, now our waste collection, their fees went up because they're being affected. And inflation hasn't come down in California.
No.
God bless.
I mean, it's already expensive to live in California, and then you add inflation on top of it. It's gotten even worse to live in California.
Yes.
Hell, I go to Trader Joe's and I feel like I just buy a couple things and I walk out. It's like, okay, that'll be $100. And you go,
yeah,
buy some milk and eggs and bread for the week. I'm not lucky enough to get free eggs like you do. So
they're not free. You think
that's
chicken
true.
is expensive?
Sorry. It's probably more expensive cost per egg for you because you have to
is.
do all the stuff to take care of the chickens. I just go to the store and pick up eggs.
Speaking of, I need to tell my kids to lock them up so that we can continue to get eggs. Anyway, moving on.
Jobs record related to COVID.
It wasn't a dismal record.
COVID's relationship to inflation globally. And by the way, COVID and immigration impacting our inflation.
Let me stop you. All right. So I would assume you're going to give Biden an A. Here's the problem that Joe Biden has. Right. You're arguing, you're fighting, you're battling, you're articulate. We could sit here for 3 hours, beer or 2 in the middle of this, and you can keep going. Here's the problem. Your president can't have this conversation. He's not capable of it. Now, my question is a serious one.
All right.
Okay. Is Joe Biden up to the job of being president? And as a little reminder, take a look at your president in the monitor.
And there's an awful lot of stories.
I'm going to skip over this because it's just a dumb things.
You had infrastructure week every week for 4 years.
We're still importing them all from Taiwan, which is about to be taken over by China.
We had $4 billion proof point just here in California with Applied Materials, bringing semiconductor investment back here in the state of California. My point being,
we're going to talk about
real results, but bipartisan results, real results, jobs programs. The IRA, I know you don't like it. I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars in green energy investment, mostly in red states. You're the biggest beneficiary of the IRA.
He raised taxes on oil, gas, coal, pensions, and, quote, taxes corporations. Corporations don't pay taxes. They pass the cost on to consumers. That's all they do. You know that.
On the issue of energy independence, I think it was your second of the list of items.
Do you think he's cognitively strong enough to be president?
I have conversations with him all the time, yes. And I'll tell you what.
You do.
I'm dead serious about that. I've talked to him when he's been overseas. I've been in Air Force One, Marine One. I've been in the limo with him. I've spent time with him.
Okay, but you never answered my question directly. How many times is your phone ping a day, people saying you need to get in this race? Because they agree with me that he's not up to the job.
I see where you're going.
Little stumble there by Gavin Newsom. I think down like a police interview. Like, how many times do you get pings that you need to run for because Biden's a demented old vegetable?
I see where you're going with that.
I'm asking.
No, and I'm not answering.
Under any would you get in this primary?
No,
none.
I think he's a man of decency and character. I'm really proud of the president. I'm proud of what he's accomplished.
Is he strong enough to be president? That's what I'm
strong enough.
talking
Look
about.
What he just did to McCarthy. He ran circles. Look.
I didn't like the vote. I wouldn't have voted for it.
Exactly. Kevin got played by the president of the United States. I'm for results. I don't think the American people benefit. I like the plan that would have saved $4.8 trillion. All right. Now, so we're at a point, I think you are far more articulate, far more versed, far more.
Is at this point where you're like, Hannity kiss his ass anymore on this interview.
Just
'Cause
crawl
it's
over
just like,
there and run your fingers through his hair and tell him how much you love his hair, Hannity.
just
you
whisper
know you
sweet
want to.
nothings into Newsom's ear. Just, I almost feel like if he did run for president, Hannity might vote for him.
Yeah.
The way he's
Yeah.
going, oh, you're so passionate, so.
I have this theory that people are going to come calling because I don't think the guy.
No.
Just my thought. Now I've got a bunch.
What do you have?
Well, look, I don't want to make this an argument. I want you to explain, because my argument to you is conservative policies work.
Okay.
I don't care if it's Ronald. I don't care if it's Newt Gingrich's contract. I don't care if it's Donald Trump's 4 years as president.
Got it.
I believe his policies work. Peace through strength work, building up our military, building a wall, enforcing law and order, energy independence. Biden gave up, which you didn't bring up.
Which I'm happy to do.
Show you a list of corporate headquarters that are leaving your state in well,
No,
wait a minute.
let's bring it on. I look forward to having this
There you
conversation.
go.
I'm well aware.
Corporate headquarters, they're leaving. San Francisco in particular, they're closing down because they can't keep their product in the store because they're getting robbed. I got another one for you. Seasonally adjusted business applications. You always bring up Florida.
Yeah.
I compared you to Florida. I think you have a higher population, if I'm not mistaken.
Significantly higher population.
Why are they doing better?
We'll have to take a look at that in more
You
detail.
take a look.
I'm happy that we're looking forward. How many more of these you have? Let's go.
About 8.
Bring them on.
Bring them
All
all
right,
on.
let's
So
do.
let's see, and if you can't see and you're listening on audio, basically shows Florida and California. Florida in 2020 had 500,000 jobs, 440,000 jobs. I mean, 2020 and 2021 probably makes sense because California was basically shut down. No one was in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of how many lockdowns did, we were out of it and then we were back into lockdowns and stuff like that. No one had the faith to start a business. It does spread out a little bit more between 2022. I did look this up because I was interested in this as well. Let's see if I can find which tab this is. Hold, please.
Are you going to be a Democrat again here?
Am I going to be a Democrat again?
I mean, are you going to suddenly shock us all with your, here's the thing, the Democrat was right?
Business formation statistics by state. As of, well, this is, so let's see, I'm going to do not month to month. Let's do year to year. This is .gov. Year to year, Florida is up 3.4% year to year from 2022. 53,528 business applications. Now, California is up 17.7%. The number is only 46,000. So there actually was more job creation or business applications year to year between California and Florida. There's way more in Florida.
Okay.
So if you, the percent, it's way more in Florida than there was in California, and California has a higher population. So yes, Florida is actually beating California. And the fact that it's up 17%, I don't, maybe it's because in 2022, maybe we were still feeling the after effects here in California. It's crazy to think 2022, we were still kind of feeling the after effects of COVID and how crazy that was. So confidence that people were like, okay, we're finally out of COVID, going backwards. So maybe there was more people, but yeah, there were more business applications in Florida, bottom line.
Maybe they all left California.
Maybe
it was all the people that left California went to Florida and were like, well, time to start a business here.
Absolutely. Well, actually they were down 3.5%. Only 38,000. The biggest percentage boost, oddly enough, looks like New Mexico. Do you want to move to New Mexico? Because that's where all the jobs are going. Nobody talks about that. New Mexico, yeah. Percentage-wise, it was the most, 24%. But they only created like 2,700 business applications.
Okay. Interesting.
But that's a huge jump. Just for 5.6%, 10,000 business applications. But again, if you're comparing the fact that Florida has less population than California, it does not look even close.
Right.
Bring them all on. Let's have this conversation.
Okay, let me ask you. This is a tough question for you.
I don't think it will be. Well, let's find out.
All right. So you're the first governor in history that has had a net migration out of the Golden State. Go west, young man.
Yep.
I lived here by the way, I lived here 5 years.
Horace Greeley.
I was the poorest guy in Santa Barbara at the time in the early 80s. If you look at, I want you to really look at this and explain for the years 2020 and 2022 why Florida is taking in nearly 1,000 people a day and you're losing 800 people a day. Right. They're leaving. Yep. Tell me why they're leaving your state.
So we'll stop at 3, or you want to do the whole?
No. We'll just answer one at a time.
18 states. 18 states had declines in population. California's was 0.3%. You didn't bring up any of the red states that had decline in populations. It's an interesting fact, and I don't see it on here. An interesting omitted fact.
What's that?
Per capita, more Floridians moved to California than Californians moving to Florida. Don't imagine is an
okay. Fact check. I feel like we should have like a fact check. This is from PolitiFact, because this exact statement: per capita, more Floridians move to California than Californians moving to Florida. Let's see what data shows. Hold on, I gotta get my highlighted. In raw numbers, close to 13,000 more Californians moved to Florida than the. However, this does not account for the state's population size, as California has about 17 million more residents than Florida, and Newsom specified he was citing per capita. So, per number, there were more Californians going to Florida. So he used that whole per capita to make it seem like it's more of a fair fight. Newsom's team provided as evidence an analysis of data compiled by researchers at the University of Minnesota. According to calculations from Newsom's team, close to 90 per 100,000 Californians moved to Florida in 2021, compared with nearly 123 per 100,000 Floridians who moved to California. Let's see. More Floridians moving to California per capita than the other way around is part of a nearly 2-decade trend. But the migration levels are small. Quote, historically, migration exchanges between Florida and California have been rather inefficient, with net migration being close to zero. And the overall numbers of migrants have been rather low considering the population sizes of the two states. So the ruling is that while, yes, it is technically true, it needs more information, and that it's not statistically significant. That doesn't really make that much of a meaningful difference. So he's trying to use this per capita, but it's such a small margin that in reality, it doesn't really mean anything. But in raw numbers, there are more people moving to Florida from California than the other way around.
Okay.
Is in one of your 8 slides. Let me take another stab at this. In 2021, California had 7.8% of GDP growth in this country, one of the fastest growing economies anywhere on planet Earth. This state continues to be the tentpole of the American economy. 25.6% of all American jobs came from this state in April. In the last 2 fiscal years, we enjoyed $177.7 billion in operating surpluses. We're on our way to be the 4th largest economy, eat your heart out, Germany, in the world. Number 1 in R&D, venture capital, more scientists, researchers, more Nobel laureates, more patents emanating out of this state than any other state in America. With all due respect, Florida doesn't even come close. Eat your heart out, Texas. California continues to be the dominant economic engine for the American
I promised
public.
you before this interview I would let you give full answers. That's a full answer.
Thank you.
Okay. Now I'm going to challenge it.
Good.
And the challenge is this is the first time in the history of the state that you've lost population.
Yes.
The first time.
Correct.
Now, I'm going to give you another sheet here. And this is about income tax.
Right.
Tax is 13.3% at the highest number. I also did more digging. The top 1% of Californians pay 50% of that total income tax bill.
Yeah.
Fully half.
Roughly. Yeah.
That's redistribution of wealth, isn't it?
Well, it's progressive tax
All right.
policy.
Now, look at yours, 13.3. What is Florida? What does that say? It says 0.
Well, it's factually untrue. It's not 0. They
have 0
no,
state
the
income
top
tax.
one. Well, the top 1% pay. Look, here you're promoting. Sean,
Is that a lie?
No. Here's what you're promoting. You're promoting regressive tax policy. We don't believe in regressive tax policy. You're promoting one component of entire tax system, the 1%.
I mean, I don't know. I think tax policy is pretty regressive here, meaning it's pretty. We should call it. It's pretty oppressive here in California.
It is.
He makes it sound like only the 1% pay California, which is certainly not true at all.
Right.
You can be basically middle class. A crap ton of your paycheck is going into his coffers. So fact check again. We got the fact checks. I'll put all the links in the show notes. Fact check. Newsom says now if Texans pay more taxes than Californians. Let's see. Other studies have found that Californians on average pay more tax than tax. Statewide averages largely reflect California's higher taxes on affluent households. In another study, the Tax Foundation, a conservative-leaning Washington-based research group, compared taxes paid by the individual with a $100,000 income in Texas and California suburb. The Texan paid $6,335 no income tax, $5,000 in property tax, and $120 in sales tax. The California $1,946, which included $5,084 in income tax, $5,000 in property tax, and $1,000 in sales tax. Tax state than California experience that holds true for most taxpayers along the income spectrum. So, to go to Newsom's point, the idea of a progressive tax scheme is that people only start to really pay the higher up the income bracket they get. Based on this study, it shows that Californians of income are paying higher taxes compared to Texas. So, fact check. Insert future soundbite of fact check.
1%. With all due respect, you and I may pay the 1%. The vast majority of people watching don't. You pay more taxes in states like Texas than you do in states like California.
Right now,
hold on. No, this is important.
We have too many
The American people don't know this. Highest tax rate for the 1%, but middle class families actually pay less than the majority of states in America in California.
So something to press get. See if this is where if he was more prepped and knew what he was talking about, would have been a better question. Someone should press him. He should have said, okay, so you support Prop 13 is a tax on the middle class, property tax. 13 protects that the property tax is not going to go sky high or only going to be at a certain percentage. Do you support 13 and not raising property taxes in California? Hold him to that answer, because I have a feeling that if Gavin Newsom had his way, he'd get rid of his party wants to get rid of Prop 13 so they can start to charge people astronomical property taxes. It's the last sort of frontier of things that they can't get their hands on. And they know there's probably billions of dollars in property taxes that they're not collecting because of Prop 13. 13 is, go look up what Prop 13 is. So I think, imagine the tax bracket in the study that I just cited. Imagine the difference in taxes that everyone would pay. And he's trying to be weaselly and say, well, middle class don't pay as much taxes. If you get rid of Prop 13 and that property tax spikes, doesn't matter. The middle class in California taxes in the entire country, there won't be any. So if he wants to sit here and pretend like the middle class doesn't pay that much in California, someone's got to press him on the fact that, do you support Prop 13 then? And you're never going to get rid of it, and you think property tax rates should be kept at a certain minimum.
California. The question is, who are you for? So who are you fighting for?
I am for. I'm just wondering, because I have homes and
pay a lot of property tax there. Double what you pay in California. I would think twice about that.
Except if you add the millionaire property tax that you put in LA County.
Well, that's a transfer tax, and we didn't do that. That was done
transfer
locally.
tax is like $500 million.
I don't know if you can have insurance down.
So
in
you're
Florida as
telling
well.
me the loss of net pop
States, we were number
and
10.3%.
and this number here, 13.3%. Now, every Californian
which
also
we've had since we've had for a decade.
Okay,
For a decade.
but right, and you supported it for a
The
decade.
public actually initiated.
Okay.
It was supported by the public.
But the point is, Florida has 0. The net population growth, hang on, per Florida
That's for
is
the
almost
1%.
is almost 1,000 new
Sean,
people a day, and you're losing.
Respect.
Wait, here's my question: is this connected to that?
No, I respect your audience too much to let us let on this.
These-
Your audience
this is a
doesn't
lie?
live in that rarefied. No,
This is a lie.
you're manipulating some fundamental facts. You're omitting the fact that the vast majority of people do not live. You're talking about the 1% tax.
1% pays half of it.
Yeah, I understand that. The American people don't live there. And the reality is when they live in Texas versus California, middle class pay more than they do in the state of California.
Texas is higher tax than Florida, that's for sure.
Yeah,
But
and
your
by the
beef
way-
seems to be with Ron DeSantis.
No, well, man, we could have it
The
for a good
kidnapper.
section.
We'll get into that in a little
But
bit.
you know, here's my point.
Yeah.
We've had a progressive tax, but I didn't establish the 13.3% that was done before I even got here. I've opposed new.
So what have you done to help that, the 13.3%?
Right.
Mr. Tax Warrior over here, you know, he wants to talk about how low taxes are in California. I don't see him going down to and saying, hey, let's get rid of these taxes, or let's lower taxes. Let's stop the gas tax. Let's get rid of all these taxes. I don't see him doing that. So
Right.
he's
He
trying to
didn't put it
pretend
there, therefore, it's out of his hands.
it's etched in stone. I can't touch it, even though I'm the, twice elected governor of California. So
new increases in tax. I oppose the statewide wealth tax. I've never been a profligate Democrat. I balance budgets. We make the hard choices. I'm a business guy starting
You have a
21
deficit of
businesses.
$32 billion this year.
This state, we dominate in venture capital, innovation. We have the finest system of public
I
higher
like how he cleverly just doesn't even answer that fact that we're in a
Right.
$32 billion deficit.
Right.
education anywhere on planet Earth. We convey more
Wait,
talent
wait.
than any place.
What did he just say about public education?
Let's go back.
$2 million,
We could just
billion
back-
dollars this year.
This state, we dominate in venture capital, innovation. We have the finest system of public higher education anywhere on planet Earth. We convey more
Wow.
talent than
Higher.
any place on the planet.
Public higher
Higher.
education, not public. He couldn't say public education because
No.
it's ranked down at like, I don't know, was it
50?
45th or something?
I don't even think it's 50, and I realized that you can't go below 50, but I'm pretty sure we did.
It's like even worse than the territories like Guam and Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Planet, this state. I mean, R&D. What did Tesla just do? They moved back into the state of California. Disney's moving their jobs back from Florida and the state of California. You didn't acknowledge per capita more Floridians coming back to California than Californians going to Florida.
That's something we already debunked, but okay.
This was anomalous. 18 states saw a decline. I love this state. Don't count us out. I've been hearing this bashing all my life.
I am not, but I have a list of all the state headquarters, and I'll scroll them on our screen, and you could take a look at them. These are all the corporations that have left your state.
And we're creating
their corporate headquarters, one after another after another. There's a lot. So what I'm pointing
how
out is,
many jobs are we creating?
You
How
can't
many
see him,
unicorn
but he
companies?
literally
How
laughed.
many
Like
Yeah.
you just hear Gavin laugh as if this is funny. This is not
Yeah.
funny because this is what's hurting people like you and I. Like,
Yeah, these
the not one.
People lost their jobs. A lot of people lost their jobs because these headquarters just got up and left.
And he just is like, ha ha ha, and,
Well,
this-
none of
I'm
this
off
is true.
camera, can you fix my hair real quick? And
None
it's not funny.
None of this is true. It's all just, propaganda.
IPOs 3 times Florida,
So-
twice the number of Texas. Don't omit all of the facts.
okay,
That's all I'm asking.
okay, I'm asking you not to admit all the facts. So we have all these corporations. Let me give you a list here. Here's the whole list: Tesla, Apple, Nestle,
Tesla just
Oracle.
moved their world headquarters
They have
for R&D
moved
back
their
here.
business headquarters out of your state.
Yeah, and how many jobs they
Here's
created
the
in
whole
this?
list. I gave you.
And how many
here's a
jobs
copy.
left with them? How many
Would you like to
jobs?
keep it?
No, but you need to know. None. It was insignificant, inconsequential. We create more companies.
It was inconsequential.
None.
It was insignificant.
None.
So to the person who worked at one of those places and you lost your job because your company moved, it was inconsequential and insignificant.
But that's how he felt about when he shut down businesses during COVID.
Yeah, it was.
You did not matter because you were, you didn't matter. You weren't who we needed or whatever. So therefore your job didn't matter. And that's been his attitude for several years now.
Every single day, more billionaires.
I'm scrolling these
No
companies.
state, no, 1/2 of America's $1 billion valued companies are in the state of California. This state economy has outperformed the nation, 3.1% in the last decade, 2.1% nationwide. I've been hearing this nonsense for half a century, literally half a century.
But they've
People
only
counting
left
us
in
out.
recent years.
How many have we created? How many new IPOs? How many new opportunities? How many jobs were taken out?
Okay, so that's we're gonna end on that. We're not gonna get to part 2. I'll give you a summation. It's basically his constitutional amendment. If you want to hear a bigger discussion about that, you can go to a previous episode we had. Osvaldo came on and we just basically dissected the whole thing. Yeah, inconsequential and insignificant is his final words in that segment. That if you were part of those headquarters that left, I'm sorry, it's inconsequential. It doesn't really matter to Gavin Newsom. And he likes to bring up that Tesla came back. Tesla, I don't know. I think they replaced all those jobs that they showed. They must be bringing 3 million jobs back. So, what are your thoughts before we end for the night and wrap up?
It'll be interesting to see Gavin Newsom running for president in less than a year.
Okay, I think that's where we're headed. We've said this before plenty of times. I think he's getting his talking points ready. I think he's getting this idea ready of like, if you looked and read the tea leaves of how he was talking, he's basically kind of saying, look, everyone wants to bash California as if it's this horrible place. But if you look closer, it's actually not that bad. And our tax system is better than Texas and and we have better job creation. So it does sound like he's trying to make a macro argument for the California style of governance. I don't think it's going to be nuanced enough for people to really get behind it when they start to see pictures. I mean, people see it already. They see the videos of people smashing grabs and crime and homelessness and all of that and rundown infrastructure. I don't think people are going to sit there and go, oh, okay, well, when Gavin explains it like that, I guess it's not that bad to live in California. But you're right. I think we'll be seeing candidate Newsom maybe not sooner than we expect. I think he'll be there eventually. I don't think Biden makes it through the general election or makes it even to the general election. So
Newsom is very arrogant. Like, yes, he's well versed in the whole speech, but he constantly, you don't need to educate me. He interrupts, rolls his eyes and scoffs, and stuff like that. And it's kind of disrespectful. It's condescending. And what we didn't show I don't remember if it was in part 2 when he brings up going to the French Laundry, which I was annoyed that Hannity did not press him further. But Newsom says something to the effect of, yeah, it was a dumb move. Okay, we don't need to keep talking about it. And it's like, no, actually, we do need to talk about it, because if you do possibly run for president and we have another so-called pandemic and something happens, like, you were there not wearing a mask. So were you actually not afraid of getting COVID? You had no concern about it? Or did you just think you were better than everyone? And so should we go through something like that again? And it's possible he is going to be our president. Does that mean he's just going to be running around doing whatever the heck he wants while telling everyone else to live in fear? But he's not actually afraid of the thing that we're supposed to be in fear of. And so, like, I didn't like that Hannity didn't press him further, on that. I know this isn't supposed to be a session, but we did talk about Hannity should have been more prepared. Ready
I just
to
don't
fact
think
check.
I don't think he's well suited for these types of interviews. I think Hannity thinks he's a better debater on these issues. I think he probably thinks he's much smarter than he is. That's why I said, like, I think more interesting if it was Tucker Newsom. Way more polished on this stuff and knows how to present it. But yeah, and it's not only French Laundry thing, it's the French Laundry. And then he was later caught at the NFC championship game down in LA, also with
Mhm.
with a whole
Mhm.
bunch of other
Yes.
celebrities and Mayor Garcetti and London Breed and all of these people who were lecturing you, wear a mask, wear a mask, wear a mask. And then none of them were wearing masks in a enormous stadium packed full of people. None of them were wearing masks. And his whole thing was, well, I took it off for pictures. And then they showed other shots of him doing nothing. He didn't have it on. But yeah, he's slick, and I've always given him this. Don't discredit Gavin Newsom. He's a slick politician in more ways than one. Yes, he does have the slick hair, but he's slick in terms of how he talks, how he gets his. You notice he's very Weasley and how he doesn't address things. He didn't even touch
Mhm.
$2 billion deficit. That was
Right.
not even talked about. It's just he has a Weasley way of kind of just going, oh, I'm not going to talk about this. I'm not going to talk about the 20 headquarters you listed. I'm just going to keep talking about how Tesla back here. That's it. I'm going to keep talking about how Tesla moved back, as if that's the savior of all of our problems, is Tesla moving back. So, but it's definitely, this is something presidential candidates do. Presidential candidates go on these types of shows because win over any segment of the vote that they can to a national audience. And I don't know how many people, I don't think he won over a lot. I would venture on Fox News, he probably didn't win over anybody. But either way, it shows and be in the lion's den and kind of push back and make his points because it took like just Google searches to debunk all of his points. But yeah, I think this is presidential stuff that he's doing, and I think that's why Hannity had him on, because I think Hannity's smart enough to know the writing on the wall is that Biden's not going to make it. Newsom will likely be the number one guy, if not RFK. So that's why they got him in there early.
I know we talked about it like at the beginning, but do you think it's possible it's going to come down to Newsom versus RFK?
Maybe. I think that's most likely the scenario. I think it will be a Newsom versus RFK.
So you think Trump would not be it? Like, you think RFK could win over? I mean, Trump's got some really loyal people.
Oh, I'm talking in the primary. I think it
Oh,
would be,
okay. Sorry.
in the primary, it'd be definitely Newsom versus RFK. I have no idea at this point. Generals are so hard to predict because
Yeah.
at this point right now, I mean, in 2015, at this point, everyone thought Trump was a joke, and then he went on to become president.
True.
So, same thing in what's another year? At this point in 2004, Dean was going to be the guy. That's a blast from the past. If you don't know who Howard, everyone thought he was going to run away with it, and then it was John Kerry. 2000, it was John McCain was the guy. Everyone thought John McCain was going to be the presidential candidate.
Was it really that long ago?
Yeah, it was really that long ago. John McCain was the guy that they were all pushing. Nowhere came, W Jr. And then, so
I like how you didn't even want to say his name.
W. You can go back election after election. At this point in the election, you have no idea who's going to win election.
Well, right.
Any scandal could happen. Anything can break. I mean, start running for president, and then all of a sudden someone can come forward and say, love affair with him for the past 2 years, and it could just all blow his face. Like, it's crazy. But a guy like this is not doing this now because he thinks he's going to run for president soon, if that makes sense.
Right. No, I agree.
I think if he wanted to set up a national, maybe at the end of his gubernatorial, his second term, he would start doing stuff like this to keep his national image going. Do this year one of your second term. You don't start doing this stuff. So that's my thoughts.
All right. So. And then if he were to win, we would have what's her face lieutenant governor who's already filed to run for governor, and
Elena, whatever her name is. I can't
Yeah, I
even
can't
pronounce
pronounce it.
she is. But yeah, so those are my final thoughts. We'll put all the links in the show. We're gonna wrap there. We went over by a little bit, but that's fine. It's okay if we go over the hour a little bit. So, any final thoughts last time, Camille?
No, that was, I'm glad that's behind me for now.
We don't have to watch that again. We're all done.
I'm sure you will make me watch something soon enough.
Yeah, there'll be another Gavin. There'll always be another Gavin Newsom interview or
Always. We
press
will
conference or
always have
something.
Gavin.
Well, running his mouth. All right. With that said, for those who are tuning in, if you want to support the show, make sure you like, share, subscribe, comment on YouTube, Rumble, wherever you're watching. Thank you to everybody who's watching on YouTube and Rumble. We do this live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. So you guys can join in, be part of the conversation as well. If you wanted the best and free way to support this show, send it to somebody, share the show with somebody, text somebody, tell them you love the show. Say, hey, if you love California politics, check out the show. The other ways you can do it is you can check out our merchandise, which you can go to my Instagram page, check us. You can get this cool noodle shirt. There's other shirts on there as well. And yeah, we'll see you guys on the next one.